Hey guys, welcome to episode 20 of the House of Goudians. So in today's episode I wanted to discuss why I feel it's important to belong to a club. We're also going to have a quick chat about the upcoming molt and preparing the birds for the molt. So those of you that have been following the channel since season 1, episode 1, we were towards the end of the molt when I started filming these episodes, whereas now we're talking more about the preparation for that. So yeah, that's sort of the education side of today's show. And then I also wanted to chat to you guys just about a new addition that I did for your benefit. So YouTube is a little bit limited in terms of getting to know your audience and that kind of thing, and also I wanted a space where I could update you should an episode be running late, if there's sort of behind the scenes footage or something like that I wanted to share with you guys. So as a result, I created a Facebook page for the House of Gouldians. So if you look at the actual channel page for the House of Gouldians, along the top there you'll notice different icons. One of them is the Facebook link. The other one is our Instagram, which is the club Instagram, not the House of Gouldians Instagram. And then there's also a donate button for those of you which wish to contribute towards the channel, however small that might be. That goes towards things like the new cages that we're moving towards, or microphones, or whatever we might need for the channel. Anyway, so let's move on to the education segment of the show now. I wanted to discuss with you the molt. Now, like I said in the introduction, when we started the channel, we were already towards the end of the molting, and I was introducing pairs to do that kind of thing, but we didn't really chat that much about how to prepare the birds for the molt. So during the breeding season, your hens are under a lot of strain in terms of egg production. So they're utilizing resources to manufacture the egg itself, whether it be protein or calcium or whatever, or the various ingredients that go into an egg basically. And that takes a lot out of your hens and leaves their bodies in quite a weakened state, which has an effect on their ability or their immune system and all that kind of thing as well. So they're quite vulnerable after the breeding season. That's not to say that your cockbirds aren't vulnerable as well. They've been sort of feeding the chicks, particularly after they fledge. They take over most of the feeding, and I've seen cockbirds lose an incredible amount of weight from the beginning of the breeding season towards the end of the breeding season, just from all that sort of exercise and that kind of thing. So both your cocks and your hen birds are needing a lot of additional nutrition and that kind of thing in preparation to get them through the molt itself. Feather production itself, and someone commented on one of the early episodes saying, oh yeah, it's not calcium for molting, and they're 100% right. The most needed item in terms of feather production is protein. The birds, well, the feathers are basically protein beta-carotene, is the sort of primary ingredient, if you like. And the birds need to sort of have the raw ingredients to be able to then produce those feathers, or quality feathers anyway. So it's important that they get plenty access to everything that they need. Now, why I mentioned calcium in one of the early episodes is because of the fact that the birds had finished the breeding season and are now needing to replenish that side as well. So I will always have eggshells available to my birds. Doesn't matter the time of year, it's a standard in my cages. During the breeding season, I have the egg food, which is obviously high in protein, but that I don't stop at the end of the breeding season. I continue that until the end of the molt. After the molt, I then cut the protein rich egg food and put the birds on basically like a maintenance diet, if you like, which is more your plain seed, and sort of a little bit more limited on certain types of seed that tend to be high in protein and fats. And then I also cut out, during what we call the austerity period, all other seed except for a little bit of white millet and red manna. And the reason then is to get the birds to lose additional weight that they've picked up after the breeding season during the molt, because they tend to be quite inactive during the molting season due to the fact that they're missing wing feathers and all that kind of thing. So they tend to feel quite sorry for themselves. They're eating obviously to make up and replenish what they're needing for the feather production, but they can then end up picking up weight as well. So it's quite important, that whole sort of cycle that you need to go through, and there's at different times of the year there's different needs for the birds. But coming back to the molt preparation, so a couple of things that I do. Because of the fact that the birds have had so much taken out of them during the breeding season, and because of the fact that the molt puts a big strain on them as well, their immune system is a little bit more compromised, or they're more susceptible to disease, shall we say, than any other time of the year. So typically if you're going to lose birds, it's during the molting season. And I find, and I've said this before, that hens that you overdo it and you breed more than 2 rounds, you tend to have a high mortality rate during the molting season. So that isn't necessarily the lack of calcium, but they've used a lot of protein to produce eggs as well, if you think about what makes up an egg. So it's natural that they would be deficient in certain things in terms of, especially on the protein side, going on to the molt side of things as well. So I like to make sure that they've got all the nutrition that they could possibly need. So that's step number 1. The next thing that I do is, particularly because of their weakened immune system, I pay a lot of attention to the hygiene in the bird room during that time. So the breeding season is a little bit different in that if you disturb the birds too much, they will be off the eggs too long, and you'll get eggs that are effectively go cold and therefore they die in shell. Or if you've got very young chicks and the parents are flighty and now you cleaning and all the rest of it, they may be off the chicks too long and don't feed, or the chicks get cold and die. So for those reasons, the bird room can look a little bit messy, shall we say, during the height of the breeding season. But I then make sure that I get on top of that whole cleaning cycle before the molt. So you'll notice that this particular cage behind me here has already been joined to form a flight, and I've put hens in there that I've finished with in terms of breeding. Those cages, when I took the birds out of, I then scrubbed completely, and then I sprayed it with a vet grade disinfectant to kill off any sort of bacteria that hadn't been, or disease that might be lurking, that the warm soapy water didn't get off. I will then clean these trays out virtually every week, time permitting, otherwise definitely as regularly as possible. And the idea is to try and keep down any possible sources for infection. It's very important as well that all your food bowls, water dishes, perches, all that kind of thing are also kept clean, so that there's minimal chance for the birds to pick up infection. The birds naturally, when they're molting, will tend to be a little bit fluffed up and a little bit unhappy, but there's a definite difference between a bird that's stressed because of the molt and a bird that's sick. So as you sort of get better at sort of picking up the difference, you'll sort of learn to identify when you've got a problem and when it's purely molt related. One of the things though that I found helped is you'll notice in the cage behind me there's stress perches, and we did discuss it in the early episodes, but please make sure that if you've got multiple birds in a flight during the molt, that you provide a lot of stress perches so that the birds can get away from each other and have their own quiet space to reduce stress. The other thing is, when I see the birds are in molt, I will double up on the food bowls, double up on water bowls, so that there's no sort of stress caused by hierarchy issues where one bird is dominating and the other birds aren't getting enough food. So I like to do that as well. Just out of shot here, you'll notice that the blue pair, they've now finished breeding, but I've got some medication in the water at the moment. And with the blues, because of them being quite a sensitive bird to illness, I'm a little bit overcautious with them. So the cockbird, he was looking a little bit puffed up, and my gut told me it's probably just because he's starting to go into molt. However, I decided it won't do any harm to do my preventative treatments now, because I normally do them this time of year anyway. So what do I mean by that? So in my case, I do a factor 5 treatment, which is one of the medications we have in this country. And that treats for 5 different things, one of them being coccidiosis, and another being that it's got a dewormer in it. I like, as part of my preparation for the molt, to make sure the birds don't have parasites that they're trying to fight off on top of molting. So I'd like to deworm this time of year. I then give them a little bit of a break with clean fresh water, or maybe vitamins in the water if need be, and then I follow up with a mite treatment. And like we discussed in some of the earlier episodes, if you're treating for mite, it's very important that you follow up 14 days later and do a second treatment to make sure that you kill off any hatched eggs in terms of mite, so that you kill the cycle completely. So for me, that's critically important, that you prepare your birds for the molt by getting rid of any worms, getting rid of any mite, and making sure that they're in sort of best condition you can ahead of the molt. It's often tricky in that a lot of breeders wait until their birds have already started molting before they stop breeding. And that's another reason why I try and limit my birds as much as possible, and I do break my own rules sometimes, but I try and limit them to 2 rounds each, or a maximum of 12 eggs. And the thinking is that way I can stop them breeding, and I have a chance to prepare them before they actually start the molt process as such. So that for me is quite important as well. So just as a quick recap, your birds need a lot of protein. You need to deworm and demite your birds, or deparasite your birds if you like. You need to look after the hygiene of the birds, and then you need to lower the stress levels in your cages by low density of numbers, more space in general, so that the birds have a little bit of more movement and they can get away from each other and that kind of thing. And then stress perches as well, as we've said, and then also doubling up on things like food bowls, water bowls, ample perches in general, that kind of thing. And the last point being is, make sure that you separate your sexes into cocks and hens, so that your cock birds aren't putting your hens under pressure to carry on breeding when they're going into the molt. So yeah, I hope that's helped you and it saves a couple of your birds. But yeah, those for me are the key sort of preparations, if you like, for the molt. Give it a try, and please, I would love your feedback in the comments or on the Facebook page. Let's hear from you and sort of see what your experiences are when your birds go through the molt this year. All right, the next part of the show I wanted to go through is just some of the show footage. We've had 2 shows recently. The Central Provincial Show, which was hosted by Reef Cage Bird Club, and then the Northern Region Winter Provincial, which was hosted by Boxburg Canary Club. So yeah, it was two very nice shows, well-run shows. And yeah, I'm just going to take you through some of the show footage of the Gouldians in particular, but also some of the canaries and some of the other species of birds that were on the show. So the first bird is one of mine. It was an orange-headed normal hen. She has really nice type and feather condition and position on perch, but what counted against her on the day was that she's a little bit on the small side compared to the general show standard. So a nice little bird. She took her first place in her class, and I was quite happy with that. The next bird, I put it up so that I can show you kind of what happens this time of year. It's towards the end of the show season. The birds are starting to go into molt, so you do get the odd bird that's missing feathers. So it becomes a little bit more tricky to judge, as you need to take this into account. But nevertheless, this bird had good type, and it took her first place despite missing feathers. This particular lilac breast I thought was a really nice bird. Once again, you know, had the odd feather that was missing and that kind of thing. Otherwise, probably would have done better than it did. But yeah, generally a very nice bird. This hen really caught my eye. Really nice bird in terms of type, good position on perch, nice clean feet, beak, that kind of thing. The only thing is the yellow on the back in places looked a little bit sort of dirty almost. May not have been, it may just be the color of the bird, but yeah, I feel that's probably what counted against it, but well deserved first prize in its section. This cockbird for me was one of my favorites of the day. Really nice type bird. You can't see it in this photo as it's lifting its head, and therefore it's got that sort of cocked head shape, and that lifts the wings off the back sometimes as well. But when he stood properly, he had a really nice position on perch, nice sort of breast shape, that back line that we look for, had a reasonably good head on him. So yeah, nice cockbird, that one. This was one of my double factors. He was a particularly nice bird when he stands properly. He's not sort of giving you the stink eye, as you can see in this photo. But what counted against him is that the yellow on the back of the bird, that was a little bit sort of, it wasn't clean, let's put it that way. So he lost out when he came up against other double factors in the sort of breeder's rung and that kind of thing, that were a lot cleaner on the back. This bird took second place overall. Very nice orange-headed normal cock. Really good size on him, good position on perch. Unfortunately, his condition let him down a little bit in that he had lost the odd tail feather, but his type was so good that he took second on show despite that. So yeah, when you compare him to the winning bird, which was a hen, this white-breasted hen, he was really nice, but his condition let him down. This hen was exceptional in terms of her breast shape and her sort of condition on the day. She was really in good nick. If I had to sort of say anything negative about the bird, just that her mask could have been slightly more full. It wasn't quite as full as some of the hens that I've seen, but really a nice bird and a well-deserved win given the overall condition of the bird so late in the season. Really nice bird, that. Right, so now we're going to move on to the sort of video footage, just so that you can get an overall, and then we'll move on to some of the other birds of different species that were on show. Right, so unfortunately I was a little bit tired by this point in the day, so I didn't write down all the names of the different types of bird, but some of them you can see on the tickets and that kind of thing. Some really nice, interesting birds on show, a lot of sort of the starling type family, and yeah, various other species of both foreign and South African birds, obviously the various canary species,
and that. Obviously, any South African birds are kept under permit, so they're all legally kept. You're not allowed to keep any of our domesticated or domestic birds, should I say, without the correct permits from nature conservation. So yeah, all of that is in place for the various owners of the birds. In terms of the things like the canaries, I mean, this Norwich, I really like the look of them. Yeah, I'm not a canary guy, but yeah, the Norwiches and the Yorkies always interest me. Yeah, very nice Bengalese, this particular one, very dark. And then this was the foreign bird winner, which was a Java or rice finch, and then you've got your zebras and various others. Like I said, unfortunately I didn't get some of the sort of more unusual birds as names like this particular chap. Exquisite bird, but yeah, unfortunately I'd be lying to you if I try to tell you what it was. One of the I think that was a border, or sorry, a fife that was on show as well.
So I happen to be the chairperson of the Gouldian Finch Collective, which is a South African based club, but there are lots of other clubs all over the world. If you in the UK, there's also, I believe they call themselves the British Gouldian Finch Club. There's in Bahrain and Iran and Malaysia, I know there's a club that's active, Russia, and all over the world. So wherever you are, there's bound to be one sort of in your country, and if there isn't, a club like ourselves do offer international membership as well. Our members can also then utilize the virtual photo booth for a photographic show that we have once a year, which is coming up now. So that gives you, you know, you might be thinking, well, why do I want to even partake in shows? I always say to people, you'll often hear them talk about how good their birds are, and they've got a bird that looks just like that at their place, or their birds are just as good a quality, that kind of thing. And those comments are great, but until you actually put your bird on a show bench, you don't really know. Your birds might be small compared to the average show bird. Your head of the birds might be a bit flat-headed compared to the show standard. So, you know, the eye often deceives until you can actually put the birds side by side. So I by far learned the most when I started participating in shows in terms of how to recognize a quality bird versus an inferior bird. And I'm busy with my judging at the moment. So yeah, it's sort of a process that you sort of can work towards if you so inclined. I mean, you don't have to eventually become a judge if you don't want to, but it's no matter what, by participating in shows, you are going to learn to recognize a better quality bird. So that's one of the sort of major benefits, if you like, of being part of a club. The next thing that I would say is a definite benefit is that, you know, it's great that you're watching this YouTube channel and that its purpose is to try and help and to educate and that kind of thing, the Gouldian guys. But a club, you're going to get more sort of hands-on type talks and that kind of thing. Our own club, we have a talk once a month when we have our club meeting, so we'll discuss the general stuff, but then we'll also have a formal part of that meeting will be the talk itself, and that may be one of our committee members or it might be an external guest speaker. Regardless, we normally have a talk. And then the other aspect, which for me is vitally important in terms of reasons for being part of a club, in that it gives you first access to the best bloodlines. You know who's breeding good quality. Now, the guys on WhatsApp groups and Facebooks, they'll always claim to have the best birds, but unless they're partaking in shows, you don't really know what their quality is like. It's easy to zoom in on a bird and make it look bigger and that kind of thing, or to sort of hide defects by cleverly timing your photos and that kind of thing. Whereas if a guy's partaking in the show bench, he builds a reputation, and therefore you know that he produces or she produces quality birds, and therefore you can put your name down when he has birds available or she has birds available to buy. And quite often the guys give their own club members priority in terms of first pick, when it comes to releasing birds, and then after that they would then make it more readily available to the general sort of WhatsApp groups and Facebook and that kind of thing, or social media groups and other contacts. But your own club members always, well, generally speaking, get first pick, so they're going to get the best quality, and that alone, you know, for me is a huge win, and why I would definitely want to be part of a club. Yeah, so those are the three primary reasons, but there's other benefits as well depending on your own sort of club and the area you're in. For example, our members would get access to a club mix, which we only sell to club members, and that's a tried and tested seed mix that we know works. Now, different clubs would then offer you additional benefits, whether it be you know, Gouldian related merchandise, or you know, stuff that's only available to club members and that kind of thing. But the most important thing, regardless of those three sort of formal aspects of or benefits of being part of a club, for me, I've learned the most in the general conversations I've had with fellow Gouldian keepers. You know, after a meeting, you sitting around having a cup of coffee or a beer or whatever the case might be, and you're having those general conversations, and you know, you might be struggling with, I don't know, maybe mites a problem in your setup, and the guy might impart really valuable information that you just hadn't thought about, or maybe on this channel where I am, you know, hopefully going to get to all the different topics. But the point is, you can ask those questions and pick up those tips that you perhaps wouldn't have had access to if you weren't part of a club. So yeah, I definitely recommend it. You can then interact with the guys. Yes, WhatsApp and social media is great, but the other danger with WhatsApp is, and I take a recent example where someone was asking about fertility medicines, and you know, each guy had a different combination that they use, and a lot of the times you then follow up with the guy later, maybe our own guys that have then later joined our club and that kind of thing, and you find that they were totally overdosing on certain things, because now they take a little bit of this and a little bit of that and they combine it, and you actually end up totally and utterly overdosing the birds in certain regards, whether it be treating for a particular disease, or in this case it was vitamins to try and help fertility. And overdosing can be just as dangerous as not giving the right meds in the first place. So yeah, you know, until you've been on those groups for a while, you don't really know who knows what they're talking about and therefore they worth listening to. Or who sort of is just thumb sucking of what they think is best. Whereas if you're part of the club, you can ask, well, you know, I'm needing help with this, and the guys will quickly say, well, speak to so and so, he's really good at medicines, or speak to this person, they're really good at the genetics side of things, or whatever the case might be. So there's that benefit as well. So yeah, I hope that makes sense to you. And yeah, it's something I would strongly recommend, and so is worth considering if you haven't joined the club already.